How would your life change if you no longer held on to this lie? If you're honest with yourself and even just told one other person the truth, empower yourself with that quick self-reflection. How is this lie affecting me? And how would my life change if I no longer held on to that lie? Hello, truth tellers. Welcome to the ADHD Scapegoat podcast. We're going to talk about everything ADHD and scapegoating. I'm Angie. I'm an ACALC, which is an advanced certified ADHD life coach. I was a late diagnosis ADHDer and trauma survivor of family scapegoating abuse. And this is my husband, Jeremy.
Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm the supportive husband and father of two ADHDers. And
Right.
yeah, that's it. That's all I have to say.
Okay, so today we're going to discuss truth telling.
Okay. Before we discuss truth telling, what's an ADHD scapegoat?
Well, in looking at different ways to explain a very big topic, I found a quote from Shannon Thomas, who's a licensed clinical therapist. And she wrote, "Being the family scapegoat means having your words, actions, and even intentions put through a constructed false filter so everything is distorted and then, if possible, used against you." And after 40 plus years of being subjected to that exact treatment, reading it felt kind of like a punch in the face, but also completely empowering at the same time. Like, wow, that's it. Yep, that explains it.
Validating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was about 4 years ago-ish, right? 4 years ago when I started really researching and like reading, just searching for resources to help me understand what I was experiencing in my family of origin. And when I came across Rebecca Mandeville was one of the biggest. She's the one who created the family scapegoat abuse term. But she talks about the narcissistic family roles. And when I found her, I could easily put each of my siblings into each given role. And since there's 5 of us, and there's either 5 or 6 different roles, depending, that were given by my narcissistic father, it was like, yeah, I am and have always been the scapegoat.
Right. And when we met, you had just been diagnosed
Right.
with ADHD.
Right, I was 28.
Right. But you always, you obviously lived with it, so you knew that you had, or you lived with ADHD. You didn't know you had ADHD.
Right.
But you also were the scapegoat for that same amount of time.
Right.
And I saw things too when we would be at, when I would be with your family, I would notice things, but it wasn't really clearly defined. It was just like, oh, my older brother's picking on me, or like this is just kind of the family dynamic.
Right.
And we've talked about that before. Like that still exists, and that really exists in all families where you kind of have your role in the family.
Right.
But yeah, when you have been kind of researching this and we discuss it, a light bulb went off in my head too, where I was like, oh my God, okay, now everything makes a lot more sense.
Right.
And you can kind of work on how do we get out of that now.
Right. And I think it's like, it's shared pretty widely about the experience of, like, if this is the only thing you've ever experienced in your life, then it feels, normal. It might feel harmful, but this is just like how it is, right? And then seeing someone who came from, a loving family with connection to kind of be like, hey, what's going on here? Like, that's not okay for you to be talked to like that. Or, like different scenarios where, like, I saw you trying to understand and also try to be supportive at the same time. And you were really, really patient. But yeah, it's kind of like once we started learning about it and understanding it, it's so much more clear, and we're even able to communicate more openly and honestly about it, any situation really, now that we've kind of opened that up. So, but it was about 4 some years ago.
Yeah, now that I see it too, I think at the beginning of our relationship, I was kind of quietly supportive because I don't know,
Right.
like you said, it's this is just how it is or whatever.
Well, I think you also wanted to support my wanting a connection with my family. You didn't want to like necessarily, shout out these toxic behaviors because you saw my genuine want for a connection, and you kind of felt like correct me if I'm wrong, but you kind of felt like if you pointed that out, then you would be like the reason I would disconnect, right?
Yeah, well, it was probably more so, my family's perfect. Your family has all of these flaws. Let me point them out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's
A natural like defense, right?
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So some of the things that we wanted to go through today, we're going to focus on the first of this list, but I kind of put together a list based on a bunch of different resources, and I thought we'll keep it to 5. I feel like 5 is a good number.
Good round number, a good even number. 5.
And this is not an exhaustive list by any means. So it's not like only these 5 reasons are why you were chosen as the scapegoat, but these are 5 that I kind of put together that I thought have a lot of depth within each of them. So number 1 is you are the truth teller. Number 2, you are a highly sensitive person. Number 3, you are curious. Number 4, you are not easy to control. And number 5, you are seen as a threat. So like I said, today we're going to focus on number 1, the you are the truth teller portion. And then for the rest of the month, we're going to do an episode for each of the other 4. Work?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I can't wait.
Okay, so the truth teller. I didn't have a filter as a kid. Like, if I thought about it, I said it. And if I heard a lie, I would call it out. Like, as a kid, it just didn't make sense to me why anyone would do anything but tell the truth. Like, why are you lying? Like, that's not what happened. And now as an adult, like, with awareness and understanding and emotional maturity, like, I still have major issues with lying. But I also have more of an understanding of what's going on. Like, I've, with my coaching as well as just my own healing, it's more like intuitively seeing if there's malicious intent or if it's just kind of an innocent, quote unquote, innocent lie because there's like lack of understanding or whatever around it. Obviously, the malicious intent lying is a stop. Yeah. So that's those are kinds of the things that, to me, say truth teller. And as it relates to ADHD, you're outspoken, you talk a lot, you don't have a filter. So ADHDers have many incoming thoughts, and part of the brain wiring is that you cannot filter. And it's not just you have so many incoming thoughts, but you can't filter through what's important and how to shut it off. But it also makes us prone to struggles of the outgoing filter. The truth is the truth. And the thought was and still is, if they didn't want the truth to come out about what they did, they shouldn't have done it. I don't think there's any shame around making mistakes or, apologizing for, those innocent lies where you were trying to help someone or, you kept some information to yourself because you were trying to protect. Like, I know you know, the two of my siblings that I am still close with and connected with held back some of the scapegoating abuse and the nasty things that were being said behind my back because they were trying to protect me. And they were doing that because they were like, she doesn't need to hear that. Like, why is that even being said about her? Like, they don't need me going to her and saying, hey, this person said all of these awful things about you. And so while, yes, I would have liked that information because it would have helped me protect myself from like trying to connect with the abusive family member. But it was like, I understand where they were coming from. They didn't understand fully like what was going on at that time as well. And so the reason they were keeping that information from me and keeping those things wasn't malicious. It was out of the kindness and like, why is that even happening? It's like, I'm not just going to go say, hey, this person said this awful thing about you. Like you're trying to get someone upset. But I think the more it went on and the more obvious it was that like me not knowing that information was more harmful, then, you know, that's when I got the information from them. So.
But it also helps you process and work on those things to be able to move past some of them, heal, and also grow through your own therapy and, you know, work past either being not as injured by those things, knowing that, you know, they're done sometimes with intent to provoke you.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So do you think, so you gave the example of your family members filtering some things, but you also said that ADHDers don't have a filter necessarily. So, do you think that you were specifically targeted because you don't have that filter and, you know, it's more black and white. You're going to see it how it is and then you'll say it.
Right.
If it's
Absolutely
meant to protect or, you know, if it's yourself or a family member or a friend.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times because of the face-to-face attacks, you know, the way that I was treated, you know, by them, that, I don't know, it was all the stuff that went on behind my back was, like, I don't know, I almost assumed it was happening, but just, I had this hope, which, you know, now learning it's toxic hope, to think that, you know, people that are constantly misunderstanding you, it's, you know, for a reason. They're not trying to understand you. But also, like, I just assumed because I wanted a genuine connection. I thought, we're family, like, we love each other. Yes, we might pick on each other. Yeah, we might have jokes, or yeah, there's like, you know, whatever, banter going on. I was like, it happened so often to me that I was almost like, as long as it's coming at me and I can handle it. Like, I always thought I could handle it. I tried to make a joke out of it. I tried to like almost join in sometimes, which is so sad, but like.
But that's protection.
It was, yeah.
Like, that's a defense mechanism.
But,
like, oh yeah, the bully's picking on me, so I'm going to join. You know, you diminish their joy by minimizing if you're in on the joke, they're not getting as much pleasure out of it as they could when they see you getting defensive or breaking down.
Right. And I almost think, like, if they were attacking another one of my siblings, I also was a target because I would stand up for them. And I'd be like, that's not okay. And I still have, like, that protective nature around my siblings because of how I know I internally felt being treated like that. If I know that they're going to enter into a situation where they're going to be harmed like that, I get really protective. And that's another ADHD trait. We have these, which we'll talk about in another episode, the high sensitivity, but like you really feel the feelings and the struggles of others, and you really have to work through, okay, what am I? I'm in control of myself, and I know that they can control themselves, and I believe like I can be a support, and a lot of stuff that I've learned in my healing that I didn't know, but it was also just like, as long as it's coming at me and they're not harming my siblings, then it's okay. And I think a lot of times knowing that I would stand up for them made me the target. Like, why, if they just pick on me, then, they have the normal Angie getting upset, Angie Wier crap that was literally on my high school graduation cake. It said,
yeah, what's Angie Wier? Because when we, like I said, when we first got together, I was like, oh, this is a family nickname because whatever it was. It was done it was a loving, like, in jest, but that.
Yeah, like when you first saw that, were you, or you heard Angie Wier, were you like taken aback? Like,
explain what Angie Wier is.
Okay, so Angie Wier was just a nickname that I'm sure it came from my dad, but not exactly sure who started it. But it just became a nickname whenever I would get emotionally charged, whether I, I'm like whining, I'm complaining, I'm being dramatic, I'm being too much, all of the things that they would say I was, when I was just like trying to have a conversation or trying to have like rational needs met as a child. And it just became like a nickname, and I kind of rolled my eyes, and a lot of times like I tried not to cry in front of them. I'd like go to my room and cry. But like sometimes I would just get like, you get to a point where you're just like, you cry and you're upset and you're like, and then it's like, I don't know, like I was weak, and it just like, no matter what I did, this is the scapegoat issue,
right?
Is no matter what I did or how I reacted, they had a response as to why it was my fault. So, so on my high school graduation, celebration cake, it said, "Congratulations, Angie Wier." And like looking back and, now that we have 2 kids, and I just can't, it's sad. It's harmful. But yeah, when you first heard the nickname, I can imagine it's like,
yeah, I mean, I needed an explanation then, too, right? Like, well, what does that mean? I think probably then you probably minimized it yourself.
Totally.
With,
like, I'm dramatic. Oh, I'm too much.
Right.
I
You
talk
accepted
all the time. I get it.
Yeah, you accepted that
the ADHD stigma stereotype attitude.
Yeah, you accepted that you deserved that nickname at that time. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. Now looking back on it, it's not shocking, but I don't know. I'm sure that it was painful to have to minimize it then, but you also, I think, maybe didn't realize how harmful it was at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely situations in my healing where I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so wrong.
If I would have just realized it then,
right.
You could have been.
Right. Well, and that's part of the, telling the truth and wanting others to tell the truth. And I'm like expecting them to be telling me the truth. Like, I could tell when someone was lying. I always like There's a lot of times when ADHDers like pull away from their intuition and really listen and hold that negative messaging so hard that they kind of, cave sometimes and kind of aren't the person that they want to be. And I did that in like moments, but I always internally knew they just don't understand me. If they just understood, they wouldn't be mean to me. They wouldn't treat me like this. And so I wasn't like, oh, I'm wrong. Oh, I'm the problem. Oh, like there were moments where I was like, okay, yeah, Angie's being dramatic. Well, whatever. But I internally knew that they just didn't understand and they just needed to understand.
But that's the them not understanding you. That's the undiagnosed ADHD.
Right. Well, that's them just seeing all of my behaviors as an issue and not wanting to deal. I mean, they don't deal with their own trauma or any of their own issues, and it's easier to blame someone than to look and self-reflect. And it's also, a way to keep me down, not getting me diagnosed or getting, hey, she's struggling with this, or she's, fourth grade, I was struggling in school and super smart and very intelligent and would get distracted and, had a hard time communicating what I was feeling or, but it wasn't ever looked at. It was like, oh, she's just, talking, or she's running into these issues in school. And I'd come home and, be frustrated. And it was like, what'd you do? Well, what'd you do? And I was like, what?
Right. I mean, this is not to minimize your experience in any way, but we're 80s kids, right? We're 80s and 90s kids. And the ADHD diagnosis, treatment, education has come a long way since then.
Right.
In that when we were growing up, when you were in fourth grade and you were having struggles in school, ADD was primarily only boys had ADD, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it wasn't the way that it presents itself in girls versus boys is different.
Which is funny because I definitely presented as the hyper boy. Like if you look at the, why boys are diagnosed before girls, it was they're talkative, they're impulsive, they can't stop moving. They're like the Energizer Bunny, and girls like kind of daydream and stuff. And I didn't do that. I was total like the active, talkative movement, like,
Yes.
I was that tomboy, but again, it wasn't really diagnosed in girls. So just because I was a girl, right?
Yeah, so it was harder, for them probably to understand what it was. You don't have the tools necessarily to communicate exactly what it could be. So,
well, and if I communicated the issue, I was the problem.
You're a whiner.
Yeah, right.
So you got diagnosed when you were 28. Do you remember when you got diagnosed? Do you remember telling your parents or family members, or like what the first time that you discussed being diagnosed? Do you remember?
I don't remember those conversations. I know I told them, but I remember like being in the psych's office and when she said that I had ADHD, and I was like, isn't it like a young boy issue? Like, really? And then she started just like explaining some of the way it presents. And I was like, oh my God, yep, checking the boxes. And, I was put on medication, given some resources, but I kind of just pieced together little things here and there at that point. And when I finally sat down and really started, looking at how ADHD shows up and how it's affecting my daily life was when we had Wyatt. So, but yeah, I don't remember having those conversations.
I was just curious, like, if what their reactions were, or if they had any reaction at all.
Well, I do feel like some more recent, meaning within the last 10 years, conversations that I've had about ADHD, and since like, getting certified and taking my certification course to become a coach, I obviously had conversations with, my parents and my siblings, and I just always got the feeling that they heard what I was saying, but, and knowing that it's genetically passed down, trying to figure out, okay, which one of my parents has it, or which one of their siblings may have it, or something like that. And I always kind of felt like my mom kind of shut it down. Like, she always seemed like proud that I was proud of it. But then if I were like, well, you might have it or whatever, and she'd be like, no, I don't. Kind of like shut that off. Don't go there, which that's kind of how she responds to any difficult conversation.
Right.
But, I felt like my dad would listen in. And even at one point, he was like fairly responsive to, maybe he does have it.
You thought he might try to get diagnosed at one point. I remember us talking about it. It's funny because I'm asking you these questions about like how they were. We've never had that conversation about when you were first diagnosed. How did your family react or whatever? But yeah, your dad did seem like he, at one point, you said to me one time, I think he might consider like exploring that to see if.
Yeah, I even sent him. I got like a gift subscription to Attitude Magazine and sent it to him for a year just to like help support. And
well, that's good for I mean, my parents read Attitude Magazine because they want to know more about your diagnosis. They want to know more about their grandson's diagnosis.
Right.
Because it is, you said too, like, you started to talk about how you may have talked to your siblings about it and they kind of had an outsider view of it. I definitely knew people who had ADD or ADHD growing up. I don't know that they were diagnosed growing up where we grew up. But, I had no knowledge of ADHD until you and I were together. Like, that was my first, like, confirmed contact with an ADHDer.
Right.
It was, oh yeah, I have this. This is what I do to manage it, and it's evolved definitely, which is awesome. But it's really fun to learn about. Especially, it's different because we have kids that have it as well, and it's hard to remember our relationship before the kids, right? Because it seems like we've had kids for 50 years.
We're tired.
But like, you know what I mean, though,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
I do remember our relationship before that, but I don't know. I think there were things too, whether it was just like work-life balance or the things that we did in our social life that
Right.
I look back now and I'm like, oh, okay, that it just resonates differently now that I understand ADHD better.
Right.
I'm not saying like we would come home from a night out or whatever, and you would always have that like, did I talk too much? Did I say too much? Like, you always, to go back to the filter thing, right?
Right.
Like, every social gathering, if it was I think you and I would watch Breaking Bad together, and you would ask me if you talk too much, or did you say too much? But no, well, every single event that we went to, you asked me, did I I feel like I put my foot in my mouth, or I felt like I shouldn't have said that. I vividly remember lots of those conversations. So it's always there.
Right. Well, and if you think about our kids, you see them, they're truth tellers. They just come out and say stuff. And you kind of just again, you have to understand, you understand how their brain works, understand there's no malicious intent. And because they're kids, right? I was always a malicious kid who's, trying to be dramatic, trying to, cause a problem, whatever. And understanding them and seeing where there's no shame in them just asking an honest question or, saying something out loud that may seem inappropriate, whatever. Did I say inappropriate just then?
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
Inappropriate. I've dreamed up so many memes. For inappropriate.
No, but it's mixing two words together. They're
we're gonna have
unruly
a
and they're
conversation
inappropriate.
about that.
I know.
Unbelievable.
Struck my phone.
Unbelievable.
But seeing them and just going, who cares if they yell that out in the grocery store? I'm not ashamed of them. They don't need to feel shame for asking a question. They don't, and that grace was never given to me. But
we encourage truth telling.
Absolutely.
It
might be uncomfortable, but
it's good though.
Yeah.
If you see something, say something. You're protecting yourself. You're protecting other people.
Right.
That's something that and it's because of you. And your education and teaching about ADHD that I'm more comfortable with it.
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah, we've talked about that. Well, it doesn't mean I've never lied. I'm not saying there have been times where, unfortunately, in order to protect myself in certain situations, where I was, had no support and was completely overwhelmed, whether it was emotionally, physically, mentally, whatever, I did make poor decisions. And if something came up and someone said to me today, you've hurt me, or you did this thing that hurt me, I wouldn't feel shame about that. I would feel sorry and, want to repair. And obviously depending on the situation, but I don't think there's any shame in making mistakes as a person without the knowledge or the support and healing that you need to do in order to see things clearly. So I've kind of always lived pretty shameless. There's things that I'm not proud of, things that I've done, and mistakes that I've made, but I don't carry shame around them. And I think that's what makes it easier for me to have hard conversations and open, honest conversations now. And it's not easy to put yourself out there and call out the truth. But I think people think they're being nice by not telling the truth sometimes. And the nice thing to do is to tell the truth and be honest, even when it's hard. So, well, to wrap up, I kind of wanted to ask some coaching question, coaching question around kind of this topic that maybe you can self-reflect a little bit. So if you are holding a lie currently, ask yourself, how is this lie affecting me? Is it, for example, thinking to yourself, is it making me sick? Am I isolating myself? Do I feel like this lie is protecting me from something? And really, honestly, answer that for yourself. And then after you answer that, then ask yourself, How would your life change if you no longer held on to this lie? If you're honest with yourself and even just told one other person the truth, empower yourself with that quick self-reflection. How is this lie affecting me? And how would my life change if I no longer held on to that lie? So you can speak that to yourself when you're alone. You can look in the mirror, which I know you would like to do.
How dare you?
But you can journal about it. In my healing practice, when I've had this come up for me, you know, something that I'm holding on to that's harming me, you know, that toxic hope was a lie, that this hope that I would be understood, or this hope that if I kept explaining and kept trying to communicate with people who weren't willing to communicate with me, was something I was holding on to. And I would journal about it, and then I would come back, because it would get it out of my head, stop this it swirling around in my head and kind of overwhelming me. And then I would take the next couple of days to come back to it and reflect on it and see, like, look at how it's evolved, or how my thoughts were, you know, changing, or, you know, evolving. But then you get a better sense of what it really is, rather than, you know, maybe your first journal entry might just be, you know, full of anger, you know, and, you know, or full of emotion, or you might not even be able to put any, you know, feelings into it. It might, a lot of times in the beginning, I would just stated facts, like I was like a newspaper, or, you know, like there was never any, like I almost disassociated from any sort of feelings. I was just like, boom, 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 this happened, like it didn't happen to me. And it's pretty shocking when you say these things and you're kind of like, I mean, the few people that I've discussed them, the big harmful things, taken aback, like, oh my gosh, you just told me that. And I'm kind of like, yeah, that's just what happened. So like actually breaking it down, checking back on it a couple of times will, you know, help you see where you're really at. Yeah, try that.
Try it out. I'm going to try it right now. I'm going to write down all my angry thoughts.
All right. I'm going to wrap it up.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you, truth tellers, for joining us on this journey. I guess it's discovery of how to understand your awareness around ADHD and scapegoating. But if you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to give this video a like, and subscribe to the channel for more content from us. And let's keep seeking truth and doing this together.
Together.